Hello, this is Lisa, CEO of Site for Wight, welcoming you to this week's Talking News. It saddens me to start with the news that we will be unable to reopen as planned on the 1st of July. The extended restrictions till at least the 19th of July mean that social group activities indoors are not allowed to go ahead. However, we do plan to reopen again on the 21st of July, assuming of course the restrictions are lifted on the 19th. This means that the first Coffee and Cake Wednesday morning will take place on the 21st of July, and the first Mix and Mingle Thursday will take place on the 22nd of July. Indeed, on the 22nd of July at the Mix and Mingle, we will also be celebrating the life of Mel Barnes here at Melbrook House. Further, the planned event at the Royal Victoria Yacht Club on the 10th of July is going ahead. This is a disability sailing day open to all members. You get the chance to look and go out on the water on several types of boat. However, we only have 4 places remaining, so if you would like to join this event, please do not hesitate to contact the office on 522205. That's the 10th of July, the Sailing Disability Day at the Royal Victoria Yacht Club. This week I've attended meetings with the Isle of Wight Council to discuss the future of the sensory provision here on the island. In light of this, the Isle of Wight Council are going to be issuing a questionnaire to all members who are registered as sight impaired or severely sight impaired. We cannot stress how important it is that you complete this questionnaire honestly and truthfully and return it to the council by the deadline. Please note, this questionnaire can be found online, in paper format or in braille format, or can be answered by telephone. Details will follow in the newsletter. We just wanted to give you advance warning that the questionnaire was coming. This also does mean that if you're not actually registered as sight impaired or severely sight impaired, which is the old partially sighted or blind, it does mean you won't automatically be included in the questionnaire, and therefore you may feel it's time to register so that you may take part in the questionnaire. Just to reiterate, this questionnaire will shape the future of services available to people living with sight loss here on the Isle of Wight. Thank you very much for listening to this week's Talking News. Stay safe, Lisa.
Art for the Partially Sighted workshop run by the Adult Community Learning. A general introduction to art for partially sighted people, devising ways in which learners can adapt their approach to making art after losing their sight. Learners will be using acrylic paints and charcoal pencils and learning about different techniques and how they might be used. They will be encouraged to record their ideas and develop their own artistic awareness. Lots of choices and ideas on what you would like to paint will be given. Learners will need some eyesight to be able to follow a bold line on a white sheet of paper and also able to see vague bright colours. The course is at the Westridge Community Learning Centre Ryde on July the 16th, which is a Friday. The full fee is £30, but a concessionary fee is £10. If you are interested and would like to find out more details, please call Susan on 522205 and she will be able to give you more contact details.
1.7 million plus of Isle of Wight council tax not paid during COVID-19 pandemic. From On the Wight, read by Chris. The council say the deficit was accounted for in the last budget set in February, but the government will help with a new collection fund to help plug the gap. During the COVID-19 pandemic on the Isle of Wight, more than £1.7 million of council tax was not paid, adding to a combined deficit across councils in England of more than £500 million. Figures from the Ministry of Housing, Local Government and Communities show a funding shortfall of £1,736,569 estimated on the Isle of Wight in 2020/21. In response to the COVID pandemic, the government asked councils to estimate the impact of the virus on the collection of funds for 2020/21. A government scheme, the Collection Fund, has now been introduced to plug the funding gap. With the exceptional balance found over 3 years and split between the council as billing authority, the police and the fire service. Data shows the Isle of Wight Council will have to address £1,494,789 with the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Police and Crime Commissioner covering £186,839 and the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Services footing £54,940. The figures do not reflect the Council's overall financial position after other funding and spending is accounted for. However, an Isle of Wight Council spokesperson said any council tax deficit in the previous financial year is rolled into the calculation of council tax income receivable for 2021-22. They said in setting the budget it had been anticipated there would be a deficit of this magnitude, and it has been fully reflected in the approved budget for the current financial year, which was approved in February. When some people fail to pay their council tax, the spokesperson said, that cost either falls on other taxpayers to maintain essential council services, or those services must be reduced accordingly. Another government scheme was announced in November, which will see local authorities reimbursed for up to 75% of irrecoverable council tax and business rate losses, which could help bridge some of the gap. While that scheme will cover a large chunk, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, CIFPA, however, has warned the end of the government-funded COVID support could make it even more difficult for councils to repay the deficit. Rob Whiteman of the CIFPA said, it is hard to see how councils will be able to afford to repay the remaining deficit without additional help from taxpayers in the future. An Isle of Wight Council spokesperson went on to say they do issue reminders to encourage residents to contact them if they are having difficulties in maintaining payment of their council tax, with advice, guidance and flexible payment plans offered. As a last resort, the council does have the power to take people to court and of enforcement action if people do not pay.
This is an article from the Island Echo, read by Terry. Council's Alliance Group sets out new political direction and strategy. As the Alliance Group of Councillors moves into its fourth week in charge of the Isle of Wight Council, it is working with senior management to set the new political direction and strategy for the Council and deliver on its policies. The aims of the group show a determination to restore democracy and public engagement to the way the Council operates, as well as taking forward key issues that are of prime concern to island residents, including finding a permanent solution to the floating bridge, which may mean scrapping and replacing it. Councillors say other key issues include spending and investing as much council money on the island as is possible, gaining greater control of the planning system and prioritising truly affordable housing for island residents, meaning housing that is not just affordable to rent or buy, but affordable to live in and maintain, placing the health and well-being of residents at the centre of all activity, and prioritising dealing with health inequalities and the resulting poverty, which has been highlighted during the pandemic, working with local communities to maintain and ensure appropriate local school provision, treating COVID recovery as integral to everything, including supporting the regeneration of town centres, and aiming to ensure there is free parking provision in all towns. The group also states that all decisions made by the new council must have regard to support of the council's climate change strategy and the impact of decisions on young people and future generations. Leader of the council, Laura P.C. Wilcox, has said, "Our group has produced a clear set of policies and principles that show our commitment to the island and its residents. as well as showing that we work well together and share that commitment, as well as the ability to work together productively to bring forward sound ideas about how we can achieve the best for our island. We have now met with senior management to set out our aims and direction, so that their total focus now will be on working to achieve the new administration's policies. The group will provide more detail in the coming months about its aims, which will form the basis of a new corporate strategy for the Council.
This is Alison, reading an article from On the Wight. Bus Back Better scheme. What could it mean for the Isle of Wight? There are bold intentions to shake up the bus service nationally, including reducing prices and increasing frequency. There's also talk of on-demand alternatives to take you to your door. Here's an outline of what's up for discussion. The government wants to change the way things happen with transport across the country. Bus Back Better is their catchphrase to cover what might happen differently with buses and other forms of local transport. What is the relevance of this to the Isle of Wight? They're encouraging local councils across the country to respond to their call for innovation and change by saying if they don't respond in time, they'll miss out on the chance of getting financial support from the taxpayer. To this end, one of the items the new Isle of Wight Council Cabinet discussed on Wednesday the 16th of June was the Bus Back Better scheme. The government have an 86-page document that will give you all the detail. But in brief summary, they say their aims are to provide buses that are cheaper, more frequent, faster and more reliable, more comprehensive, easier to understand, easier to use, better to ride in, better integrated with other modes and each other, greener, accessible and inclusive by design, innovative, and seen as a safe mode of transport. On the cost of bus travel, it's interesting to see in the Bus Back Better document that across the country, average bus fares have risen by 403% since 1987, compared to 325% for rail fares and 163% for motoring costs. The government say they want prices brought down. Some parts of the Isle of Wight are less well served by bus routes and all-hours services, which also happens in other parts of the country. The report says, in lower density areas and at less popular times, conventional fixed route buses can never compete with the attractiveness or flexibility of the car. But now, aided by technology, demand-responsive services can, offering a more personal, on-demand service, taking people from their doors or closer to their doors than a regular bus. It will be interesting to see what is proposed by the Isle of Wight Council here on the island, but Southern Vettis are making noises about buses getting higher priority on the island's roads. It sounds like road layouts could see some changes, as, to benefit from the funding in this strategy, LTAs, that's local transport authorities, in such places will be expected to implement ambitious bus priority schemes and draw up ambitious bus service improvement plans. Bus priority schemes in cities usually see the buses having their own dedicated lanes, so they can whoosh around without being slowed or stopped by traffic jams. It's currently unclear if this would be considered here. The government wants local councils, or LTAs, to do this in collaboration with the bus companies. In their words, bring together LTAs and their bus operators in every part of England to set out plans to improve local bus services and break the vicious cycle of decline. Most LTAs have a deal with one or more bus companies to provide services. As islanders know, the Isle of Wight has just one, Southern Vettis, in turn part of the transport giant Go Ahead Group plc, which runs bus and rail services in the United Kingdom, Singapore, Germany, Ireland and Norway. An update. On the Wight contributor Stuart George has pointed out that saying one bus service provider is inaccurate. Not quite true, as there's FYT bus in the West Wight and Service 31, which runs between Bonchurch and St Lawrence via Ventnor and can be found on page 84 of the current Southern Vetties timetable. News on the Wight asked Southern Vetties what their take on all of this was. They promptly responded with the following from Andrew Wickham, Managing Director of Southern Vetties. Now is the right time for a national strategy on buses. This is our chance to embrace green and efficient transport and further increase the number of passengers travelling with us here on the Isle of Wight. If we are to do that, we need to make our buses an even more attractive option. They must be regarded as quick, reliable and convenient. For our part, we have invested heavily over recent years to provide one of the country's most comprehensive bus networks. Southern Vetties is among the first local operators to have next stop audio-visual onboard announcements, making it far easier for our customers to know exactly where they are on their journeys with us. We have also made it easier for people to pay for tickets, introducing contactless payments on all our buses several years ago. All this has led to even higher demand for our services. Prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, our services were used extensively by those living on and visiting the island for a wide number of purposes, from commuting and tourism to shopping and social occasions. And, as one of the few operators running services on Christmas Day, we understand how important public transport is in connecting people, as well as towns and villages. Even during lockdown, many key workers have been relying on us when travelling across the island. Now we are looking to the future. Buses are no longer for those who cannot afford a car. They are a serious alternative. A full double-decker bus can take as many as 75 private cars off the road. So our large fleet has an unquestionable opportunity to help change the Isle of Wight's air quality for the better over the coming years. Our own commercial investment has helped build the popularity of public transport here. Now it is time to complement this by continuing to work closely with the Isle of Wight Council to give buses higher priority on the island's roads and tackle rush hour gridlock. Not only do people with easy access to public transport have more chances of getting a job, buses play a vital role in social inclusion, helping to reduce isolation and loneliness. By working in partnership with our local authority, we as a private company can respond to demand effectively, delivering better services for all.
Isle of Wight's first football golf course opens at Tapnell Farm from the Isle of Wight Radio, read by Elaine. Lace up your boots. The Isle of Wight's first football golf course opens at Tapnell Farm next week. Islanders will be able to the course from Monday the 21st, just as the nation gets gripped with Euro fever. For those who haven't played before, football golf uses the same rules as golf, but instead of using a club, players take turns to kick a ball into the hole, using the fewest kicks possible to score. The course at Tapnell Farm has two 9-hole options. One is a short course with a range of fun obstacles to tackle, and the other a 9-hole long course which is more about going the distance. Players can also combine the two to play 18 holes. The short course costs £6 per person, the long course costs £8, or for the whole 18 holes it would cost £11. Located on a hill, there is also the added bonus of enjoying the stunning countryside and sea views. As well as the island's first football golf course, Tapnell Farm is also home to the island's only outdoor aqua park, farm park attraction, archery, axe throwing and clay pigeon shooting. For more information about the football golf and other attractions at Tapnell Farm, visit www.tapnellfarm.com/play.
HMRC scam phone calls target islanders. From Isle of Wight Radio, read by Chris. Residents on the Isle of Wight are being targeted by scam phone calls claiming to be from HMRC. A number of people have reported receiving calls from a random mobile phone number. On answering, they are met with an automated threatening message claiming to be HMRC. Callers are then asked to press 1 to speak to an advisor. This is a scam. HMRC said, HMRC is aware of an automated phone call scam which will tell you HMRC is filing a lawsuit against you and to press 1 to speak to a caseworker to make a payment. We can confirm this is a scam and you should end the call immediately. This scam has been widely reported and often targets elderly and vulnerable people. Other scam calls may refer to national insurance number fraud or offer a tax refund and request you to provide your bank or credit card information. If you cannot verify the identity of the caller, we recommend that you do not speak to them. If you've been a victim of the scam and suffered financial loss, report it to Action Fraud. The calls use a variety of phone numbers. To help HMRC investigate, share call details on the suspicious phone call reporting form. Include the date of the call, phone number used, and content of the call.
This is an article from the Island Echo, read by Terry. Hospital patients and staff pulled up on inappropriate relaxing of COVID safety measures. Inappropriate relaxing of COVID preventative safety measures at the Isle of Wight's only hospital by patients and staff has led to calls for people to stick to the national guidance. Speaking at the Isle of Wight NHS Trust Board meeting last week, Medical Director Steve Parker highlighted the issues of maintaining a safe environment in St Mary's Hospital as we head towards an end to lockdown. He said, "We are starting to see an inappropriate relaxing of either social distancing and use of PPE by our patients and staff. Our response to that is obviously driving forward the message around PPE and the message we have maintained throughout the pandemic around following national guidance. When going to St Mary's, wearing a mask indoors is still a requirement, as well as observing social distancing. Other measures also include arriving at the hospital as close to the time of your appointment as possible, and by yourself to reduce the risk of infection. Visitors for patients in some departments will only be considered in exceptional circumstances." Chief Executive of the Isle of Wight NHS Trust, Maggie Oldham, said that while the COVID position on the island remained stable, it was a position that changed very frequently, so the Trust continued to be very vigilant and follow all the national guidance. In just a matter of weeks, by the 19th of July, all restrictions will be lifted by the government. In her report to the board, Miss Oldham said a disturbance of the COVID recovery plan could negatively affect the work to clear waiting lists. She also anticipated increased demand for services due to more people mixing indoors and travelling to the island. Maggie said scientists are already predicting a third wave of cases in the summer and urged all staff, patients and the wider community to exercise caution, follow the guidance and remember hands, face, space and fresh air. In the first 2 weeks of June, just 30 new cases have been found on the island, according to government data.
This is Alison reading an article from Island Echo. New guidebook to Dinosaur Isle Museum and Isle of Wight fossils. To mark the 20th year of the opening of Dinosaur Isle Museum at Sandown and 200 years since the foundation of the collection, the museum has published a new guidebook to the island's fossils. Alongside their work providing support to other essential services during the pandemic, Staff at the museum have worked with local fine and paleo artist Trudy Wilson to produce the 230-page book. The book is more than a guide to the museum displays, as it showcases many other fossils, spectacular and common, found on the island. The new book is called Dinosaur Isle in 101 Fossils and has been written by Assistant Community Learning Officer Alex Peaker and Museum General Manager and Curator Dr. Martin Munt. Trudy Wilson designed and brought the work together into an attractive and accessible format. Rather than describing the individual fossils, the book uses them to tell the 125 million year geological story of the island, along with what the fossils tell us about ancient environments. Mixed in are anecdotes about the people who discovered them and places they were found. Dr. Munt said, "This book has only been possible because of 200 years of fossil collectors, museum staff and volunteers supporting the museum and believing that our world-class fossil heritage should stay here where it belongs on the island." The book has been written for the general reader, and we provide a glossary of the technical terms to help with understanding.
Sir Geoff Hurst and Harry Kane among England's stars sporting Isle of Wight made T-shirts. From Isle of Wight Radio, read by Elaine. England legend Sir Geoff Hurst is among the famous faces sporting T-shirts made by an Isle of Wight clothing company. Current England captain Harry Kane, former goalkeeper David Seaman and Sky Sports presenter Jeff Stelling have also been pictured in the T-shirts. They've been produced by Tea Mill, an offset of island firm Rapa Nui, for the Bobby Moore's Fund and Cancer Research UK. The fund was set up to raise money for bowel cancer, following the death of England's World Cup winning captain Sir Bobby Moore. Donning the words "We Believe," the T-shirts have been released to coincide with England's Euros 2020 campaign. The fund posted, "We believe in 2021 that with a young and talented squad, England could go all the way. We believe we could see another iconic day at Wembley. Most importantly, we believe that we can still tackle bowel cancer, despite all the challenges the past year has thrown at us." Football icon Dion Dublin, presenters Dan Walker, Bianca Westwood, Claire Tomlinson and legendary commentator Clive Tydeslail are among the other famous faces to wear the shirt.
This is Alison reading an article from Isle of Wight Radio. Cow's Pub has music licence extended despite local objections. A Cow's Pub has had its music licence extended despite a neighbour's objection bringing it before an Isle of Wight Council committee. The Vectis Tavern on Cow's High Street has been granted permission by the authority to play music until 1:30am Monday to Saturdays, 12:30am on Sundays and 2am on special days such as Christmas Eve and Boxing Day. While applying for the licence though, the applicant said it was only being done to allow flexibility as the tavern is still open at that time, and this will allow, in some instances, background music to play or late arriving music acts to continue playing their full set. One objector, however, said music from the pub was already so loud they could not sleep, and large groups of people outside, late at night, displayed antisocial behaviour. They also said guests of a holiday property they owned had also been disturbed by noise on the street, and believed the granting of the licence would severely affect their business. Officers said the objector knew the proceedings were happening today, Monday, at a meeting of the Isle of Wight Council's licensing subcommittee, but they did not show up, with the last known complaint against the Vectis Tavern submitted to Environmental Health in 2017. This complaint was not upheld. Speaking at the meeting for the Vectis, Anne Cook said issues of antisocial behaviour that occurred on the High Street were often falsely attributed to the premises, as she runs a very tight ship. Mrs. Cook said they have always had a robust approach to dealing with noise and antisocial behaviour, including employing door staff who controlled crowds and let groups in and out of the premises. She said, "I can only stress we are a high street location, and if you are expecting to hear no noise at all on the high street, you are booked in the wrong location." Footage was shown of premises around the Vectis Tavern on the first weekend of June, where large groups had gathered and were said to be shouting, laughing and chanting. Mrs. Cook said at times like that they took action immediately, as they were extremely responsible and flexible. But people were accountable for their own actions once they left the premises and go up the high street. But it was hard to control with the pub taking the rap for the majority of premises. Question on how often music would be played that late by Chair of the Committee, Councillor Darrell Pitcher, Mrs. Cook said they had no intention of doing so on a regular basis, but maybe only once a week, if that. Members of the committee remarked noise was already present in that area of Cowes and granted the extended music licence, as it stood with an additional condition that the noise management plan, as submitted within the application, be adhered to.
Court orders partial closure of Newport home following antisocial disorder. From Isle of Wight Radio, read by Chris. A Newport home has been partially closed by police following persistent antisocial behaviour and disorder. Activity at the address in Manor Crescent had been having a negative impact on the quality of life of other residents, prompting calls to the police about the nuisance being caused. Working in partnership with Sovereign Housing, a partial closure order was approved at Isle of Wight Magistrates Court on Monday under the Anti-Social Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014. The order means that no one can enter the property unless they are a named and authorised person or have permission from the police. Any breaches are enforceable by arrest. Inspector Andy MacDonald from the Newport Neighbourhood Policing Team said, "We've taken this step having received a number of reports in recent months about antisocial behaviour and disorder at this address. We listened to local residents' needs and concerns and worked in partnership with Sovereign Housing Association to take action. The activities of the occupant at this address has had a negative effect on quality of life on those living nearby. This order would not have been possible without the help and cooperation of the local community, so we would like to thank them for their support. I hope this order sends out the message that we will not tolerate antisocial behaviour and we will use every available power to stop it. Anyone concerned about antisocial behaviour where they live should contact their neighbourhood policing team on 101. For any complaints surrounding neighbours, ensure you make contact with your local housing officer. For noise complaints, please contact your local council."
Roadmap set back, a bitter blow for Isle of Wight businesses, says Cabinet member from On the Wight, read by Elaine. Councillor Love says the island has pulled together over the last year and shown true community spirit. We must all keep on to ensure the safety and well-being of our island. That's the message from Councillor Carl Love, the Cabinet member responsible for public health, as the government delayed the final step of the coronavirus lockdown easing roadmap by 4 weeks until the 19th of July. Councillor Love said the news was hugely disappointing and a bitter blow for local businesses and the island's hospitality sector in particular. However, he said it was crucial everyone stuck to the good behaviours they'd learnt over the past year to kick the virus into touch and keep the island safe. Councillor Love said, "I know everyone is feeling extremely disappointed right now, but I'm so proud of how islanders have responded to the pandemic so far. This setback will not faze us. Over the past 15 months, the island has pulled together and shown true community spirit. We must all keep on to ensure the safety and well-being of our island. For our visitors, please make sure you pack face coverings, hand sanitizer and extra medication. You should also be testing yourself twice a week to help ensure you do not bring the virus to the island. The rise in cases in the UK is being driven by the Delta variant, first identified in India, which is more infectious than the previous dominant variant. Monday's announcement means that limits remain on groups of people meeting, with groups of up to 30 allowed to meet outdoors and up to 6 people or 2 households allowed indoors. But the 30-person cap for wedding ceremonies and receptions, as well as wakes, will be lifted from the 21st of June. Simon Bryant, the Council's Director of Public Health, added, "We can't afford for cases to increase. That's why, even when everyone wants to get back to normal, it's more important than ever that we remember hands, face, space, fresh air. Running alongside these daily actions, we need to get regular LFT tests when we don't have symptoms, self-isolate and get tested immediately when we do, and take up the vaccine when it's offered. Every single act of care and caution keeps the virus on the back foot, and every time someone does those simple basic things, they are playing their part in countering COVID. Please keep it up."
This is Alison reading from the Island Echo. Araton Oil consultation launched by Environment Agency. A public consultation has been launched by the Environment Agency after an application for a permit to drill for oil was received for a location in Araton. UK Oil and Gas, UKOG, which has licences to drill for oil on the Isle of Wight, has already received over 3,000 objections to the application for a well exploration site in the area. Now the Environment Agency has called on residents to have their say and will take into account any objections that are valid. If the permit was granted, UKOG would be allowed to operate at the proposed site near New Barn Business Park for 3 years. As well as 2 exploratory boreholes, the works would also see the installation of heavy plant equipment alongside drilling and testing equipment. Natural gas produced during the testing of the well would be burnt by a temporary on-site flare, the same sort of equipment that can be seen in the air at Fawley Refinery. Oil, surface water and other products from the site would be collected and removed from the site for further use and disposal. An environment permit sets out stringent conditions that all oil and gas sites must adhere to. If you'd like to have your say, you can comment before the consultation ends on the 9th of July 2021.
This is an article from Isle of Wight Radio, read by Terry. St Mary's surgery backlog progress could plateau, warns hospital. The number of people facing a year-long wait for surgery at the Isle of Wight NHS Trust is coming down, but a health boss has warned progress could soon plateau, with waiting lists growing again. As a result of the COVID pandemic, waiting lists for elected surgery spiked at the start of the year, with more than 1,000 people waiting for procedures. Between May 2020 and February 2021, the 52-week waiting list rocketed by 1,839%, from 56 people in May to 1,086 9 months later. Elective treatments were halted nationally to stop the spread of COVID infections and to focus resources elsewhere. But significant backlogs built up, and trusts are only just starting to make a dent in the lists. At the Isle of Wight NHS Trust, after hitting a high in March of 1,128, the number of patients waiting has been coming down month on month, with latest figures showing 184 people were treated in April, taking it down to 944, with the number falling further to around 750 in May. Chief Operating Officer at the Trust, Joe Smith, said good progress has been made on the recovery of waiting lists, which will help people receive treatment quicker. Despite the huge gains in May, however, Mr. Smith cautioned the Trust Board that while the lists had gone down very quickly to begin with, the progress would plateau. He said, "The total incompletes, a number of people on the waiting list, is actually going up as people start to bounce back in. Of course we are getting the long waits down, but that doesn't mean we are winning the battle with the overall number, so that remains a caution. Maggie Oldham, Trust Chief Executive, said waiting lists were not just numbers. They are people who have been waiting a long time for treatment, and we must do all we can to ensure they are treated as quickly as possible. She went on to say, the emergence of new variants of COVID-19 and the threat of a third wave of infections on the Isle of Wight presents a risk to the future delivery of this work. When questioned whether people were prioritised on the waiting lists due to health inequalities on the island, a practice used by other trusts in the country, Mr. Smith said it could be a situation where you are damned if you do and damned if you don't. He said, I would be concerned about taking people out of date order because we have so many cases. Last week, I spoke to an 86-year-old gentleman who is waiting for a hernia operation. He is not urgent by any means, but when I spoke to him about the potential he would be waiting 18 months for a procedure that for him is a considerable length of time to be waiting.
Pfizer vaccines now available at Riverside Vaccination Centre. From Island Echo, read by Elaine. Islanders are being reminded that vaccination appointments are available for residents over the age of 21 at the Riverside Vaccination Centre in Newport. People aged 39 and under who are eligible and pregnant women will be offered the Pfizer vaccine in line with updated JCVI guidance. Previously, Riverside was only offering the Oxford vaccine. Eligible people should book online at www.nhs.uk/condition/coronavirus COVID-19 or call 119. It is hoped that over 18s will be invited for their vaccination by the end of the week, as previously reported by Island Echo. If residents attempt to book online but appointment slots are full, they should continue to keep checking the national booking system as more appointments will become available. People do not have to travel to the mainland for a vaccination appointment unless they choose to do so. If you receive an invite from your GP, do act on it as soon as possible so that you can join the millions of people who are helping to protect themselves and others. The Riverside Centre in Newport is open 7 days a week, 8 till 8, and people can choose an appointment slot best suited to them.
This is Alison reading an article from the Island Echo. Certus's plan for fuel depot in Whippingham recommended for approval. Certus Energy's new fuel depot on the Isle of Wight has been recommended for approval by the Planning Authority. Potentially joining Seacam on the Island Technology Park site in Whippingham is a fuel depot for the Fuels Company, which would see 3 125,000 litre tanks installed, as well as an office building, switch room and external lighting. It would be the new permanent island site for the company, which would have a loading and unloading operation following the closure of one of the island's biggest suppliers, Isle of Wight Fuels in East Cowes. Certus said the fuel depot would supply road diesel, red diesel, kerosene and industrial and home heating oil for island homes and businesses. There would be inbound deliveries at any time, with outbound lorries operating between 0600 and 1800 hours Monday to Saturday. Isle of Wight Council planning officers say the development could be supported in principle, in accordance with economic growth aims, as the site on Whippingham Road had previously been allocated and granted permission for mixed-use employment. The island's branch of CPRE has said the strategy for the site to create jobs has failed and also raised concerns about the site being inappropriate, given the proximity to Osborne House and other historical areas with associations with Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. They said the proposals were short-sighted and would leave a damaged and polluted piece of countryside. Alternative green and clean energy should be sought instead. Officers say the tanks, which would be no more than 5 metres in height, would be relatively low-key in comparison to other buildings and structures proposed for the site, and a modest use of the land in terms of scale. The fuel tanks would be integrally bunded, so any possible failure or leak would be contained within the structure. Spill kits would also be held on site. The nearby primary school has objected to the application due to safety concerns, with the proximity of 3 local educational establishments, Seacam, Priory School and Queensgate Primary, and says the risks to young people have not been addressed. Planning officers say safety concerns have been considered and would be addressed through site operator compliance with other regulatory regimes, like the Health and Safety Executive and the Environment Agency. Light pollution was another issue raised by local residents, who thought it would have an impact on residents and wildlife. However, officers say the external lighting would complement the character and appearance of the surrounding area and not detrimentally affect the protection of dark skies. The application will be determined by the Isle of Wight Council's Planning Committee next week, as it is a development involving council-owned land.
This is an article from Isle of Wight Radio, read by Terry. Sun lounges, sea and kayaks. Ryde Town Council harbour plans approved. Paddleboards, kayaks and deck chairs will soon be available to hire on Ryde seafront after the Town Council had plans approved. Permission for Ryde Town Council to install a storage container next to the Harbour Master's office has been granted, despite some objections. Named Ryde Leisure, the business will operate between April and October each year for a maximum of 5 years. It will house equipment such as kayaks and paddleboards, which can be used on a stretch of beach from the harbour to Apley Tower. Concerns had been raised over the impact on Ryde Conservation Area and the fact the container would be visible from adjacent properties. However, a statement of justification said it would not appear visually intrusive and would be significantly better in appearance than the adjoining Harbour Master's office. The statement reads, "Overall, the modest scale of the proposal would have a negligible impact on the character of the wider conservation area, especially noting the intention of it only to be temporary. It is also noted that the building would provide a facility of storage to allow commercialisation and improved facilities for visitors to the beach, which would assist with the tourism asset that it represents. The structure could be visible from adjacent properties along the seafront, as mentioned in the objection. However, this would not result in any loss of amenity upon neighbouring dwellings due to the vast separation distance between the development and nearby properties. As the harbour has substantial defences, the site would not be prone to flooding, according to the council. Ryde Leisure will be used temporarily until a more permanent solution can be agreed." Reacting to the granting of approval, RTC, that's Ryde Town Council, said, "With 250 plus deck chairs and sun loungers, windbreaks, parasols, as well as paddleboards and kayaks available to hire, the scene is set for fun on Ryde's magnificent beach this summer. This is a great step forward for Ryde and is a crucial stage in making Ryde the island's go-to destination this summer." As Isle of Wight Radio previously reported, Ryde Town Council has been named as a special purchaser of Ryde Harbour. It means the Town Council has been given the first option to buy the harbour from the Isle of Wight Council.
Hello, this is Paul,
And Megan.
and we're going to start with letters to the editor. Right, this is a letter from Vix Lauthen at Newport. Islanders rightly have much to talk about regarding the proposed Boundary Commission plans for 2 MPs for the Isle of Wight. And first and foremost, we absolutely must move from 1 MP to 2. We deserve it. Many islanders have spoken about how arbitrary the proposed east-west dividing line is, and talk that Fairlea should not be in the east and that our county town of Newport should never be divided. But as a Newport resident who remains open-minded about where the boundary line is drawn, wouldn't our town have stronger representation if we had the ears of 2 MPs? Unlike the other towns across the Isle of Wight, drawing the east-west boundary through Newport will give Newport residents double the MPs, double the voice and double the number of people working for us. Of course, putting a small area such as Fairlea as separate to the rest of Newport does not make sense. But rather than campaigning for the whole of Newport to be one constituency, maybe we could consider a more equal east-west divide within the town, thereby giving residents a year of both MPs and bringing our community together in the centre of our island. Then it would truly remain our county town.
And Hans Bromwich from Cowes writes, where is Isle of Wight NHS 20 million actually going? In May, the Isle of Wight NHS Trust announced it would take 2 years to simply catch up with the backlog of elective surgery. That's with working evenings and weekends, and this would only return things back to the long waiting list which pre-existed before the pandemic took hold. Many medical conditions, of course, in the interim have become considerably worse and are now presenting as ailments requiring more complex treatments and recovery times. Moreover, this estimated timeline all presupposes no new COVID variant comes along which circumnavigate current vaccine protections. Surely there needs to be a much more imaginative and dynamic response. A few months ago, I asked the Isle of Wight NHS Trust several questions about the £48 million they were awarded back in 2019. It has since become clear that 18 million was earmarked for IT and buildings on the island, with 10 million going to Portsmouth University Hospital, leaving 20 million presently unaccounted for. St Mary's currently has a hodgepodge of buildings in the North Hospital, amongst which is a current day surgery unit. Why not use the 20 million to build 1 or 2 standalone satellite day surgery units, staffed by their own independent dedicated teams? This would turbocharge the backlog of elective surgical cases, while adding resilience and future-proofing these essential services. Should the virus rear its head yet again, these units could operate autonomously and wouldn't all need to be closed down if one became compromised. The island has a high proportion of elderly in its population. They can't hang around for years waiting for elective surgeries. It makes sound economic sense to treat them promptly so that they can get on with their lives in a healthy capacity and not become a burden on health, care and social services. Let's invest in our NHS here on the island and build back better.
It says support on our European friends from the Committee Islanders for Europe. As we approach the 5th year anniversary of the European Union referendum, it is important to remind islanders that all EU and economic area citizens and their families must formally apply to the Home Office for the settlement scheme in order to continue to live and work in the UK. Action is needed so that our European friends can remain in this country and continue to contribute towards our communities. Since 2016, the rights of all our residents in the UK have been eroded, our rights to travel, to work, to study, and for some even a right to vote in elections. It is not just the 3 million EU citizens living in Great Britain who have to deal with the consequences of the government's Brexit deal, but also local employers who have shortage of staff and skills, and businesses who have found importing and exporting goods a significant challenge. In addition, since the referendum in 2016, the nations of Scotland and Northern Ireland have come under increasing political and economic pressures to no longer be part of the United Kingdom. Our union and centuries of shared history remains under threat. We will continue to support and be a friendly space for our European friends and all islanders who value close connection with European business, people and places. We hold meeting and social opportunities as well as campaigning on important matters. Contact us at islanders4Europe@gmail.com.
And from Felicity Thompson, Sandown, the title of her correspondence is Sandown Signs Mislead and Damage Business. The road ahead closed sign at the Sandown town end of Culver Parade is very misleading and is very detrimental to tourism. In tough times, we can't afford to deter people from visiting the beach, the zoo, Brown's golf course and tea rooms, the bandstand restaurant, the adventure playground, the dinosaur museum, etc. Or parking by Yaverland Beach to enjoy the ice cream and beach goods shop there and the golden sand at that end of Sandown Bay. The road is not closed until Yaverland, which is at least a mile further on from the sign, and even then at Yaverland there are traffic lights, so there is still some way through. To put a sign at the beginning of Culver Parade just opposite Sandown Library is wrong. It could be better sited past the zoo and be more correct. Then it would be the road ahead. There are, of course, roadworks everywhere, mostly to do with white fibre, but after several inquiries through Islands Roads, this sign appears to be for SSE, but no one is keen to take responsibility for it. However, the particular placing of this sign is not playing fair in a difficult trading time. The island needs every chance it can get, and every island trader needs a chance. Please, could the sign be recited as soon as possible?
This is a letter. What is Bob's position on lifting of lockdown? For Edward Giles at Wootton. On February 22nd this year, the Prime Minister told the House of Commons, "We cannot escape the fact that lifting lockdown will result in more cases, more hospitalisations and sadly more deaths. This will happen whenever the lockdown is lifted, whether now in 6 or 9 months, because there will always be some vulnerable people who are not protected by the vaccines. There is therefore no credible route to a zero COVID Britain or indeed a zero COVID world, and we cannot persist indefinitely with restrictions that debilitate our economy, our physical and mental well-being, and the life chances of our children. With lockdown now extended till at least July 19th, and some ministers actively hinting it could go on until next spring, could please Bob Seeley explain to us why his government's position has changed in the last 4 months? At a time when the vaccine programme is a great success, the NHS is under no threat of being overwhelmed, and COVID-related deaths are often under 10 a day. So that is now its policy intentionally to debilitate our economy, our physical and mental well-being, and the life chances of our children. I have been trying to get Mr. Seeley to explain to me what his personal position is on ending lockdown, but he does not appear willing to answer my letters. I hope, though, he will at least make his position clear through the columns of the county press."
And from Tina Snow, Newport, she writes, "I write with increasing frustration at the number of vehicles which jump the lights at Coppins Bridge. In my view, there is no safe link between Staples Road and the main High Street. Myself and my guide dog, Quiz, have had at least 7 near misses on the pedestrian crossings between Staplers and the Newport High Street. In an ideal world, pedestrians need a separate footbridge across Coppins Bridge, but I realise the cost is too high and there is practical reasons why this can't happen. Please would the Isle of Wight Council and Hampshire Constabulary consider urgently installing a fixed CCTV camera and number plate recognition so the offending drivers can be caught and prosecuted. Unless urgent action is taken, someone will be seriously injured or killed on these crossings. May I appeal to your readers to report all incidents of light jumping to the police so that we can get a real idea of the problem. And now we come on to Wight Memories. And this is written by Anne Grant, and it's entitled Life-Saving Boys Caused Unexpected Ripples. It is hard to believe a spontaneous, selfless act of bravery by 4 young island lads could provoke the ire of the ultra-patriotic Great Britain stalwart John Bull. But it did just that 100 years ago. In August 1919, 3 Yarmouth Yacht Club members, Brigadier General G.H. Nicholson, his son Major Nicholson, and friend Major Annesley, got a soaking during a race when their yacht, Penguin, shipped water and sank. The local boys witnessed the mishap and immediately rowed in rough water to the yachtsman's rescue. A freshwater vicar, the Reverend Tilke, considered this highly commendable act worthy of the acknowledgement by the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. He wrote to them about the incident. They deliberated and some months later duly agreed. Thus, it wasn't until January 1920, when the youngsters were publicly rewarded, that the story became more widely reported in UK newspapers. All the boys, Roy Higginbottom, 13, Arthur Russell, 13, and Frederick Wadham, 10, of Yarmouth, and Cecil Cornish, 9, of Newport, were given an RNLI Vellum certificate and a gold enamel badge for life-saving. This press coverage attracted the attention of John Bull magazine, a publication known for a stiff upper lip take on British life. The editor voiced his disapproval with sarcastic remarks aimed first at the officers and then at RNLI. What, you may be wondering, was the problem? The magazine recounted the story of the rescue of the Solent and the awards, and then added, but of course the boys had long before that been rewarded for the lives they saved. They were given a 6 shillings and 6 pence, which nowadays is 32.5 pence, by the gallant brigadier and his party. This handsome sum, divided between the 4 boys, exactly amounted to 1 shilling 7.5 pence. No one can accuse the brigadier and his friend of putting too high a value on their lives. It seems virtue remains its own reward. The editor wrote an open letter to the RNLI to question the veracity of the heroic act and subsequent awards. He said, "Your society recently awarded a very high honour to 4 Isle of Wight boys. According to the General's own version, the boat met with the accident in very shallow water about 100 yards from the shore. They could have reached land without difficulty or danger. I understand that you did not communicate with the General before awarding the medal, though usually the most searching inquiries are made. Perhaps you will agree that an explanation is desirable. John Bull." The RNLI reply was published a few weeks later. It said, "Cecil Cornish showed promptitude and good seamanship in going to the assistance of the yacht, which capsized and sank in 14 foot of water. Furthermore, According to Reverend T.J.W. Tilke, Wesleyan minister of Freshwater, the occupants of the vessel were clinging to the mast and in serious danger due to the risk of the yacht turning on her side and submerging the mast, an occurrence which actually happened. The institution therefore recognised the prompt and plucky action of these boys, all under 14, by presenting them with certificates and gold badges. John Bull concluded, "There is a direct conflict between the versions supplied by General Nicholson and the Lifeboat Institution, which may leave readers to form their own opinions of the facts. The war of words was over, and CP readers, County Press readers, will form their own opinions of John Bull." By the 1960s, Britain had moved on, the magazine sales sank, and it ceased publication. What of the miserly financial reward the boys received? It would have bought a very large bag of sweets each in a tuck shop. Alternatively, it was the price of a dozen eggs, with change left over, and as this was soon after the First World War, 12 eggs for a young family would have made a welcome meal. And what became of the plucky boys? Did they reach manhood and survive the Second World War? Did they marry, have children? If so, and any descendants are reading this, get in touch. So you still have the Vellum Certificate and Bravery Award? Can you supply better photos than these grainy images of the boys from century-old newspapers? It would be interesting to know if any of them later joined RNLI and went out to sea to rescue again.
Now move on to My View. This is an article by Matthew Chatfield. Since the start of the pandemic, going out to be with people has taken on a special significance for us all. There's a place that I've visited 3 times since the start of the first lockdown. Most recently this week, that destination is the Isle of Wight Crematorium. This quietly municipal building in pastoral surroundings belies its significance. As the island's only crematorium, it is here, sooner or later, we gather for one last memory of people who are special in our lives. A place of sorrow and mourning, of remembrance and understanding. Thus, any of us who expect to live out our days in this beautiful county can't help but reflect on the time when we would take that last awkward turning off the Whippingham roundabout to be placed on the civic catalogue as the purple curtain gently closes around us. When I was in my 20s, it seemed as though every summer weekend meant another wedding or engagement party. Then, predictably, a few years later, christenings were scattered across the calendar. Those days are gone for me, so you could be forgiven for assuming that I'm now at the life stage when black-edged cards are starting to drop through my letterbox. Sadly, in this case, that's only partly true. One of my 3 visits to the Crem was to bid farewell to an elderly friend who had died after a long and very fulfilling life, a sad but appropriate event. But the other 2 were both funerals of men who had taken their own lives. Devastating, tragic, and impossible to understand. We shy away from speaking of suicide, but speak of it we must. And now, more than ever, the agony of those left behind is not known why, because we can never really truly know why. Was it COVID-19? This has been such a huge thing in our lives, it's hard to know what to blame the virus for. Our pandemic emergency response is now fading, but the damage done is not. It will be felt for generations. Education, business, relationships and our own long-term physical and mental health will be affected. True, there are good things coming too, but for every tourist venue that's going to be packing in customers this summer, there will be somebody else whom the pandemic meant heartache and the end of a dream. There is something we can do to help. Reach out to your family or friends. Be with them and also let them know what's going on for you. It might not seem like it, but they need that contact now more than ever, and so do you. Help and support is available right now if you need it. You don't have to struggle with difficult feelings alone. Phone a helpline. They're open 24 hours a day, every day. You can also call for advice if you're worried about someone else. Samaritans 116123. Children for children and young people under 19 0800 1111.
And we go on to What's On. The cricket feast at New Close. A seconds match between Hampshire and Middlesex will kick off a 2-week feast of cricket, the New Close Cricket Festival, at New Close County Cricket Ground today, Friday. The match, part of this year's ECB First Class Counties T20 tournament, starts at 2 p.m. The first of a 2-week list of fixtures during the festival. With government rules on spectator sport easing, the game is not being played behind closed doors, with free parking and admission to the ground. Spectators are welcome to bring their own picnics, with drinks and snacks also available from the pavilion. The last time New Close hosted a Hampshire seconds match, it was against Sussex, captained by the man in the news, Ollie Robinson, who was dropped from the England squad amid controversy over alleged racist tweets made as a teenager. Hampshire were led that day by Jimmy Adams, who will manage today's Hampshire side. On Sunday, the Isle of Wight Cricket Board will stage the Women's and Girls Open Day from 10 a.m. It will feature an Isle of Wight Dynamo session and games until 11:30 a.m, followed by a ladies' softball even, called 100. With 1 or 2 matches played between noon and 1:30 p.m, as well as under-12s and under-16s hardball starting at 2 p.m. and 3 p.m. respectively. Festival fixtures will feature a touring MCC squad. For all the fixtures, go to https://www.newclose.org/fixtures.
Right, we now move on to 6 additional news items. Shanklin stalwart Bill Jenkins has died at the age of 101. Farewell to a cricket legend. The island has lost one of its cricketing legends after the death of Shanklin's Bill Jenkins last Thursday at the age of 101. Club players and officials paid tribute to the club president, who had been a member of the West Hill Club for 61 years. During that time he served as player, captain, committee member, chairman and latterly president. Only this month, County Press freelance writer John Hannam wrote a major article detailing the achievement of Jenks. The feature told of how he had been a Portsmouth school footballer and went on to be on Aston Villa's books in his native Birmingham before the Second World War intervened. After the war, when he served in the Army Rifle Brigade, he had a trial for Southend, but played non-league football for Hampshire, Havant, Newport and Ryde before breaking a leg in a Boxing Day charity game. It didn't stop him playing cricket though, and he scored more than 10,000 runs for Havant Rovers in between working for the Inland Revenue. He chose Shanklin as his island club and was quickly made captain, playing alongside fellow greats of the island game such as Bob Welsh and Bill Palmer. He scored more than 13,000 runs for Shanklin and always relished the encounters with big rivals Ventnor CC. Bill was made president of the club in 1996 and continued in the role until his death. He was also captain of the Isle of Wight county side at the age of 50. Funeral details have yet to be announced.
Islanders proudly on Queen's Honours List. 3 Islanders were named in the Queen's Birthday Honours List. Graham Bliss, 58, was handed a British Empire Medal for services to the island's community. He is the Managing Director of Natural Enterprise, which supports the rural economy and the island's natural environment. He also plays a key role in the staging of the annual county show, is the chief executive of Gift to Nature, helps run the Royal Isle of Wight Agricultural Society, and is involved with the Isle of Wight's Young Farmers Club and Rural Fund Local Action Group. Mr. Biss said, "I'm humbled. When you think about all the great things being done on the island by so many other people, it's a real honour. I'm just lucky to be part of a bigger team, both at Natural Enterprise and the various groups I'm involved with. I want to give a big thank you to everyone who's played a role. I'm just really a small cog in a much bigger wheel." In the same month, he is due to retire from the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service. Deputy Chief Fire Officer Steve Apter was awarded the prestigious Queen's Fire Service Medal, calling it very much the Apter Teams Award. On Twitter, he said he felt absolutely honoured, proud to be part of an amazing team, but mostly to have the love and support of my family, served with the best of the best. DCFO Apter led the former Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Service through significant change, and as Deputy Commissioner for London Fire Brigade attended incidents including the Westminster Bridge terrorist attack and the Grenfell Tower fire. In 2011, he became Chief Fire Officer for the island and recently managed HIWFRS's response to COVID-19. He was also responsible for overseeing the creation of the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Service. Chief Fire Officer Neil Odin said it was richly deserved and called it a fitting tribute to DCFO Apter's commitment. Jeremy Dale, founder of Cowes-based SeaSafe, was handed an OBE for services to maritime safety. The firm's signature product is a coat that becomes a life jacket in less than 5 seconds, transforming the safety of maritime professionals across the world. Jeremy's career started as a boat-building apprentice in the 1970s, and he is now chairman of Cowes Yacht Haven, a supporter of the Miss Isle School of Sip Puff Sailing, and a former Vectis Rotary Club president. He also drives for the Sporting Bears, which gives people the chance to see dream cars up close. He said, "I took over at SeaSafe 29 years ago. Our product is designed so if you climb up ladders on the side of ships and fall off, it automatically inflates and saves lives. It's a team event. We've been doing it for a long time. We've got lots of great people here. Without them, we couldn't do anything."
I know the education he needs. A mother is battling with the Isle of Wight Council to get her son an education which will see him flourish. In a fight to get an education, health and care plan, EHCP, for her son Caden, Freya Sadler has said she is stuck in a situation where the council are refusing to assess him, with the authority passing responsibility on to others. The council said, however, EHCPs are issued only in exceptional circumstances. 8-year-old Caden has learning disabilities including ADHD and autism, which means he finds going to school traumatic, and he's taught at home by his mum using materials provided by Medina House. With such complex needs, which also include hypermobility and communication issues, Caden's progress since reception has been stunted, failing nearly 5 years behind classmates. When he was attending Oakfield Primary, violent meltdowns meant in one term he was excluded 10 times. Freya says the council is refusing an EHCP assessment which could provide more support for Caden through additional funding for more learning provisions, helpers, or even a place at a special needs school. This is despite the fact he has a doctor's note saying he may not be suited for mainstream education. Figures from the Department for Education show in 2020 the Isle of Wight Council was the 12th highest authority in the country to refuse an EHCP assessment. It was also ranked 5th highest to not issue an EHCP after assessment. Freya said she started to fight for Caden because it was obviously not okay that he was violent towards other children, but if he was at a specialist school, plans will be put in place. She said the advice she is getting is suitable for a fully competent child, but not one with complex learning disabilities. Freya said lots of mainstream schools can meet the needs of SEND children, but not Caden's. All I'm trying to do is get Caden a place where I'm confident they can teach him in his own way. An Isle of Wight Council spokesperson said they couldn't comment on individual cases, but it was important to recognise schools are able to meet the needs of most children with special education needs without the need of an EHCP. Where there is a disagreement on the need for an EHCP, the spokesperson said mediation was offered. Mediation, sorry.
An apple a day means lovely cider. A couple have swapped their busy corporate desk-based lives for making cider on the Isle of Wight, and this year their product is in a shop, cafe or pub near you. It's glorious, spending a day out in the orchard in autumn collecting apples. Ex-patent attorney Helen Jones told the county press. She and Catherine Bouton, who used to be a research scientist for universities and at the Natural History Museum, are the creative forces behind Grazed Knee Cider. 7 years in the making, their plan has this year reached fruition. We've been planting an orchard just outside Shanklin. It's a mixture of cider, dessert and cooking apples, with a view to putting together a blend that's going to be good for making cider, and we've been making it in a cave in Ventnor for the last couple of years. It all came about when the pair were cycling on the mainland. A pothole filled with gravel and water led to an unseated rider and a grazed knee. Later, mulling over the events of the day in the pub over a delicious cold cider, an idea was born. Helen said, "We were hitting our 50s and thought it would be good to spend a bit more time outside. We're not from traditional cider-making parts of the country, and neither of us has come from farming backgrounds. We've been on a National Trust working holiday, which was a cider-making week in Surrey. We'd seen how it was made, and it seemed like something that was manageable. We thought it was a good idea to plant some trees and to try to capture some of the carbon we'd sent up into the atmosphere in our lifetimes. A few years of practice, producing for themselves and for friends, was followed by their first proper year in business, with around 300 litres to show for their efforts. Much of that first batch was sold to the Griffin in Godsill for its cider and sausage festival, and almost sold out that very first day. Helen said, the following year we were put in touch with the guy in Knighton who has a cider apple orchard. He had previously been having his apples pressed at Rosemary Vineyard. We did a deal with him and he offered us his apples in return for some cider. We ended up with 2,000 litres of cider, and that's what we're now selling. Bottles of Grazed Knee cider are on sale through licensed premises and Isle of Wight shops. The product is registered with the Wight Mark scheme. It is a product which does not have to be sold straight away. If you store cider, it matures and gets better. We've got a nice big space where we can store bottles and tanks of cider, she said. The ethos behind Grazed Knee cider is one of the natural processes and locally grown apples fermented with wild yeast. The couple's orchards are low intervention, and their cave in Ventnor is cool, allowing for a controlled and stable fermenting process, which Helen says produces the best flavour profile. The plan is to expand over the next 5 years, reaching around 7,000 litres. There are also plans for a community pressing day after a successful one in Bryston last year.
Offender was in a drunken stupor. A Carisbrooke man in a drunken stupor stood in the middle of St James's Square and shouted abuse at police officers. Samuel Christopher Dunklin of Nottingham Lane appeared before the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court last month. The 31-year-old admitted being drunk and disorderly on May 11th of this year. Prosecutor Anne Smout told the court officers on patrol were called to a group of males at St James Square, Newport, around 6 p.m. She said they appeared to be drunk outside a pub in the town, and Dunklin was among them. Mrs Smout said Dunklin was stood in the middle of the road, braying abuse towards police trying to drive through the area. She said officers challenged him and he refused to leave. Mrs Smout described the scene as a busy town centre and said Dunklin received numerous warnings. When officers witnessed Dunklin pushing a friend trying to move him away to the floor, they arrested him for being drunk and disorderly. The court heard Dunklin had a large number of previous convictions, the most recent in July 2020. Oscar Vincent defended said sunshine and fine weather had been factors. He said it was also a day of emotion for Dunklin, whose father died in 2020. Mr Vincent said his funeral took place 2 weeks before the incident and Dunklin had been upset he could not attend the service. He said Dunklin was in court for a separate matter on May 11th which affected him emotionally and met a friend by chance after his hearing and he decided to go for a drink. The court heard Dunklin consumed around 4 pints and had little recollection of events. Magistrate said it was refreshing to see Dunklin in court more infrequently than before.
And 2 homes plans could link villages. Houses are planned for a greenfield site where residents have previously worried any development would close the gap between Nettleston and Seaview. Plans submitted to the Isle of Wight Council by Phil Salmon Planning, who is listed as applicant and agent, are for 8 houses built on a field off Seagrove Farm Road next to Seagrove Pavilion and the football pitch. 2 2-bed, 2 3-bed and 4 4-bed houses are proposed as a mix of detached and semi-detached buildings. The site is next to the Donkey Field, owned by the prestigious Eton College, which could be the site of more development in the future. Campaign group Save the Donkey Field formed in September last year to protect the land after a 150-year-old oak tree was felled. Action to protect other trees on site was taken with orders preserving them made, but since then the group has found, through information requests, multiple sets of pre-application planning advice about the site, the latest in September 2019 for either 3 or 9 houses. Asset manager for the trustees of Eton College, Camilla Capaldi of Clear Bell, confirmed the site was deemed deliverable for up to 12 houses as a result of the Council's Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment process, but no application had been made. Seaview residents at the time were worried any housing on the stretch of green space from the football pitch down to Seagrove Bay would close the gap between Nettleston and Seaview. To accommodate the 8 houses, vehicle access from Seagrove Farm Road would be extended to the site. Islands Roads, however, has recommended the development be refused due to inadequate access visibility and width, a lack of parking provision and the generation of traffic onto the highway. Seagrove Farm Road, in its current width, the Highways Authority says, causes potential conflict with other users, being only 3.1 metres wide. In a transport statement provided in favour of the application, it is said the road could be widened to 4.8 metres. But Islands Roads has said in some areas there are boundary issues and in others the carriageway would only be able to widen to 1.5 metres, which would not allow 2 cars to pass one another unhindered. One objector said there was no suitable access to the development as the road was too narrow for any increase in traffic, with vehicles already mounting the pavement.
Serial shoplifter warned of prison. The serial shoplifter added 2 further offences to her extensive criminal record and was warned by Isle of Wight magistrates, offend again and you could be jailed. Emma James, 34, admitted shop thefts at Morrison in Newport on April the 24th and 27th. On April the 24th, James and a male accomplice stole 3 candles and a fur blanket worth £34. She went to the self-scan checkout, paid for one of the candles with cash, then placed the remaining items in her bag and left the store. They were arrested outside the store and the items were recovered from the accomplice's suitcase, said Liz Miller, prosecuting at the Isle of Wight County Court. 3 days later, James of Newport Road, Ventnor, entered the store and selected 3 cans of gin fizz and a chicken sandwich worth $16.70 and left without any attempt to pay. The items were not recovered. Her last conviction for shoplifting was in November last year, with a further 20 on her record. Jobless James was on a year's probation at the time of her recent offences to address her alcohol and drug abuse, and had also received a warning letter for failing to attend an appointment, the bench was told. For James Cameron said his client was a vulnerable person who had suffered a bad previous relationship, which saw her alcoholism spiral downwards. Magistrates handed James a concurrent 6-month probation order and was warned if she failed to comply with it, she faces a possible jail term. James was also ordered to pay £16.70 to the supermarket in compensation, a £95 victim surcharge and £85 worth of costs. Yeah, that's all we've got time for, so it's goodbye from Paul.
And Megan. BBC Radio 4 programme In Touch follows now. We have no scaffolding news this week. Accessible COVID testing working from home. Rapid lateral flow tests from COVID-19 were criticised earlier in the year for not being accessible to people who are blind or visually impaired. The government promised to do better, but did it happen? Spectators are making a welcome return to some of the big sporting events of the summer, including test matches and the European Football Championships, but they are only allowed into stadiums if they can show proof of a negative lateral flow test or double vaccination. Are you itching to get back to water cooler chat in the office? Or does the thought of commuting again fill you with dread? We discuss the merits of continuing to work from home versus returning to the office.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Good evening. Well, should you stay or should you go? We'll hear the pros and cons of continuing to work from home versus going back into the workplace if you're visually impaired. Well, it's something many of us are going to have to make a decision about sometime soon, if you haven't already. We're really keen to hear your thoughts on this, so do email intouch@bbc.co.uk. And as if you needed encouragement to get in touch with us, proof this week that it can reap rewards. After contacting us about a problem with the Milk and More website, Marianne emailed us back to say, thanks to the magic influence of In Touch, I can now use my Milk and More site in landscape mode. Well, glad it worked, Marianne, and thanks to Milk and More for taking notice. Now, the return of fans to sports events, even though in reduced numbers, has brought back some much needed atmosphere to stadia. But it's also highlighted the importance of testing, because to get in at either the test match at Edgbaston last week or England's group game at Wembley in the football at the weekend, fans had to show that they'd either been fully vaccinated or had proof of a negative lateral flow test. Well, the government made twice weekly lateral flow tests available to everyone to order. But despite campaigns to improve accessibility, organisations say not enough has been done to enable blind and partially sighted people to use them independently. We'll hear from the RNIB in a moment, but first, Sean Randall joins us from Worcester. Now, Sean, you're someone who's doing testing a lot. Just tell us your situation.
Hello, Peter. Thank you. Yes, well, I work at a college, so I have to be tested twice a week before I'm safe to go into work. And I do now have responsible, if that's the right word, enough sighted help at home. My daughter is now old enough to read the tests if I need her to. But that really wasn't the point. I wanted to be someone who could do this on my own. And I was just quite shocked at the lack of any enthusiasm for making this more accessible, really. My process now is that I do the test of a morning. By the time I come out of the shower and gotten ready, the results ready to be read, and I use my phone to take a picture of the test, and I will send that to a sighted person, be it on an app designed for voluntary help, or be it, sighted colleagues or friends to get the result read. But it's really not a perfect solution by any means, because it means I can't do it completely on my own, and that's as far as I can get at the moment.
And I understand your workplace has offered to help, but that created problems as well.
Yeah, they were brilliant. They did all they could. They said you can come in and get tested if you want to. We'll help you with that. But that would have mean changing my whole lifestyle around. My daughter has to go to school. My transport times would have had to change. Why should my disability cause that upheaval, really, when technology is there to step in?
Well, effectively, it would mean that you had to go into work to find out if you could go into work, wouldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And the bottom line is, if there was no sighted person to send that photo via your phone, you wouldn't know the test result.
No, I'd have had to go into work on a different schedule, and I would have found that quite discriminating.
Well, the government was asked a written question about this on the 12th of April. The Health Minister, Helen Waitley's reply is read by a member of our team.
New tools are being introduced for those ordering home test kits who are visually impaired, including improved boxes, which are easy to assemble for the returning of tests, instructions in Braille, audio and large print, and an RNIB information line to hear a recorded version of the instructions. On 1st of April, we launched the Be My Eyes app, which offers live video assistance from trained NHS test and trace staff. To support those who are unable to administer the tests themselves, there are now more than 50 static regional test sites across the United Kingdom, which offer assisted testing.
Well, the RNIB have been campaigning on this issue, and we can speak to their campaigns and policy manager, Mike Wordingham. Did those improvements happen, and did they make things easier?
Well, RNIB have been working with NHS Test and Trace since May last year on two user trials with blind and partially sighted people to improve the accessibility of home testing kits. But so far, those improvements have been put in place for the PCR tests. So far, they haven't been put in place for the lateral flow device tests. But we understand that is happening now. It's just not as quick as we would have liked.
Sean described the technique of actually making a phone call and getting a sighted person on the phone, as it were, with a photograph to give you the result. Is that not an answer?
It's certainly a step in the right direction. What we've asked for is that the improvements that Helen Waitley mentioned, particularly the live video assistance through Be My Eyes, be moved over to the lateral flow device tests. So then you can go to the specialist advisors through Be My Eyes and they can support you to take the test and read the result. And I understand the process is underway.
This is a whole new set of circumstances. What more could the government still be doing better when it comes to accessibility?
So I think all the public health information and public health interventions that have been put into place since coronavirus have shown really clearly that something has to change in the way these things work, particularly that accessibility needs to be built in from the very beginning of government projects and policies so that we're not a few steps behind.
Let me just quickly go back to Sean Randall. I mean, what would you like to see? What more could they do actually in this situation, given that it was in the first place a completely new situation that they were confronted with?
The thing that caught my eye, if you like, is that I was being offered accessible or more accessible boxes for my PCR tests a week after I'd had to start lateral flow testing. Things just moved so slowly. There was no sense of urgency. And I'm quite surprised that people like the RNIB didn't invest more in things like apps. But we've had apps that can read pregnancy tests being researched and designed. The technology that shows you whether you've got a positive or negative result on a flow test is something that visually a computer program with the right coding could identify quite reasonably. if you're making people use technology to get some live person on the screen, who's then got to wait half an hour after you've done the test to read your result to you, could there not have been a parallel research strand in place to use technology to read that result?
Let me just go back to Mike Worthingham. You say the government have been slow off the mark. Have you been a bit slow off the mark yourselves?
So we had discussions with Test and Trace to take some of the innovations that have been put in place, particularly around the pregnancy test, and how they could be used for future testing. So that's definitely something we're working on.
OK, Mike Worthingham, thank you very much indeed. Sean Randall, thank you, and do stay with us because we want you to chip in on our next item about working from home too. Well, we did ask the government for an interview, but no one could be made available. However, in a statement, they said, we keep the accessibility of lateral flow testing under constant review and are working with partners to explore how this can be further improved. Well, do let us know your experiences of accessibility when it comes to testing. It feels like it's only going to become more important as things start to reopen fully, whenever that might be. Now, getting back to some of your emails, and last week we talked about the importance of lighting in the home. But one solution I was aware that we didn't touch on in that item was how the choice of colours in a room can make a difference. Dr. Kevin Mansfield emailed to make the point that it's not just the lighting that's important. The use of contrasting colour is a useful technique. A door frame in a contrasting colour to the surrounding wall, a dark coloured edging strip perhaps to a work surface compared to the top. Kevin says this can work with the lighting to reveal shape and form and assist navigation in the home. And we've continued to get some fascinating responses from you about our discussion on the role of genetics in visual impairment, and in particular the decisions some of you have taken around undergoing some form of genetic testing. This from Sarah Caffrey.
I had my genome tested, and like your speaker, it took 3 years to get my result. My main reason for doing it was to find out from my parents if my condition was inherited or not. I wasn't bothered either way, and it hadn't changed much in my life. But my parents were not expecting the result and were a little taken aback by it, as they thought it had a different cause. I would be interested in hearing more on the potential consequences of genome testing from the perspective of finding out additional disabilities, conditions or diseases, and any implications these might have for things like life insurance or mortgages. Also the potential for future prenatal testing and the impact this could have for parents being encouraged not to have the child with visual impairment.
Well, Sarah's thoughts there illustrate just how deep this issue can go, and it's one I'm sure we'll come back to. Now, a new phrase has entered the lexicon. I don't know if you've come across it yet. Hybrid worker. It describes the new way in which many of us are being asked to work, including, for that matter, here at the BBC. It means working from home will continue to some extent, so you can still walk the dog or do whatever you want to do between those endless Zoom meetings, with office attendance likely to be cut down to something like 2, maybe 3 days a week. So how do you feel about that as someone who is blind or partially sighted? Well, we've still got Sean Randall with us from earlier to talk about it, but let's introduce two new guests. Both work for local charities in their area. Gary Eady is an IT specialist with Sight for Surrey, and Georgina Hollinshead works at CamSight, that's a Cambridgeshire charity supporting people with low vision and blindness. Gary, if I can start with you, just give us a flavour of your average day and how working from home has worked for you.
Well, my average day, Peter, used to consist of getting up sort of like 6:40 in the morning, having breakfast and the usual sort of stuff, and then going off on my daily commute to the office, take about an hour and a half out of my day just to get there, spend about 7 hours in the office and then another hour and a half on the way back. But now, in this working from home arrangement, which I'm currently in, I get up a bit later. I start work about 9:30. I don't get much interruption actually all day through, and it's a more relaxed environment for me.
Is it just the time thing, the saving time, or are there elements of hassle to do with your visual impairment that you're glad to be rid of?
It's most definitely both. The journey itself is 3 trains and a taxi, and then on foot for quite a distance. So there's a lot of stress involved in that, and my sight's not very good at all. So I'm really glad to be without that hassle, and I'm less stressed when I get to work.
OK, let me bring in Georgina. How about you? Because I think you've got a slightly different take on it.
Yeah, so my usual day would be getting up and coming into the office for 9 o'clock, doing a bit of paperwork, then maybe going out on a visit to somebody's home or perhaps a rural group that we put on. So it's a bit of travel in and out. So and then, at 5 o'clock I'd get the train back. And for me, I like the mix. I like the mix of a couple of days going into the office, but not being every day, because the travel can be a bit problematic. But also, I really enjoy that as as being independent. I'm walking to the train station, I'm getting the train, I'm walking to the office, and now I'm in the right mindset to be in the office.
You see, that's interesting, because I think a lot of people perhaps would think, why would a blind or partially sighted person want to impose that kind of potential stress on themselves when they now would have what might sound like a perfectly good excuse for not doing it?
I would say that in terms of busyness of trains and stuff, there's never been a better time, because, I used to have to get the train home and I'd have to stand up, but now there's seats for me to sit down, so.
I've noticed that, I must say, that suddenly you can travel. But of course, it doesn't alter the fact that there are still roads to cross, there are things to crash into, there are all the things that go with blindness and travel.
Yes, yeah, definitely. But I like to talk to my clients about this and say, you're doing it for yourself. I'm doing it for myself. It's for me, even though it's a little, you might walk into something every now and again, but
So it's part of independence, basically.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and I can control when I go in, when I come out, what days I work in the office, what days I don't, and just the interactions with people if they may be in the office at the same time. Having lunch in the same building as someone is really important.
Yeah. What about that, Gary? Because, although I understand what you say about having perhaps more control over your environment, you're not having that face-to-face contact with people, are you?
No, and to be fair, I do think it's important to go into the office. I'm on Georgina's side a little bit there. I think working from home all the time isn't necessarily a good thing, but certainly some of the advantages of working from home is... what I found was, if you go on the trains and there's a train delay, that would often put me behind in my day. I've got appointments at certain times of the day, whereas at home, I can just arrange those appointments via Zoom or WhatsApp video call or whatever it might be, and I can be bang on time with the client. And the client themselves, they don't have to have the hassle of coming in to see me in my workplace, because that's what normally happens. So it's much easier for both me and the client.
And I think you've also made the point that you thought that perhaps in sort of some situations where you have both visually impaired and non-visually impaired people on a call, for example, you feel slightly more at equal terms in this situation?
Well, most definitely. So using Zoom as an example, I can take part in a Zoom meeting and I can know who's in that Zoom meeting just by looking at the participants list. Using my screen reader, of course, but if I was to attend a meeting, I wouldn't really know who was in it.
Expand on that point about meetings, Gary. What do you mean?
Well, in terms of the main difference is I'm just getting physically to the meeting, and once I get to the meeting, finding the room, finding a seat within the room, and then knowing who's in the room. Whereas on Zoom, I just enter using the invitation link. I can then browse the list of participants to find out who's in the meeting, and I feel on an equal platform to anybody else in that meeting.
Georgina, I just wonder whether one thing that occurred to me has occurred to you, given your attitude to saying you quite like going in. Did you fear the loss of confidence if you weren't using your mobility skills?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, I found that even for myself, the first time I went in, I was like, oh, I thought I would be better. So it took me a little bit longer, and it took me just finding everything in the office again. I kind of forgot where everything was.
So you mean when you were going back, you were less confident than you would have expected to be?
Yes, but I also think that I'm more confident now than I would have been if maybe I'd put it off any longer.
Let me bring back Sean Randall, who we talked to earlier about testing. What about you? Because I understand you've had a bit of a change of heart on this one.
I started off loving it. I thought, oh, the commute's gone, that whole hanging around and being late and everything. And as the time went on and I realised I couldn't go anywhere at all, I began to think, this is a bit claustrophobic. I began to appreciate the commute more as a headspace time to get my brain in gear and to switch off and leave things behind at the end of the day. And I'd lost that. I'd gone from being able to get ready and then go in and prepare myself to just getting up and being there without any sort of transition period. Can I just also come to the point that Gary made about Zoom meetings versus live in-person meetings? I thought it was going to be a good thing for blind people and visually impaired people as well. But obviously my job involves teaching young people. And if they've not mastered those e-meeting skills to see who is in the room, to see who is speaking, to know when something's being shared with them, that can be even more disadvantage to them if they're in a physical meeting. So there are swings and roundabouts. It was a good learning experience for the young people to learn how to do this sort of thing. It's not something that people tended to do before the pandemic. But yeah, it's been a very mixed bag, absolutely.
Well, it sounds as if we are perhaps going to have to acquire a whole new load of skills for both ways of doing things. Gary Eadie, Georgina Hollinshead and Sean Randall, thank you very much indeed. Well, I'm sure you'll have things to say about all the things we've discussed in the programme, so keep the emails coming, intouch@bbc.co.uk, and you can get more information from our website, bbc.co.uk/intouch, from where you can also download tonight's and previous editions of the programme. From me, Peter Wight, producer Simon Hoban, and studio managers John Cole and Philip Halliwell, goodbye.